The alarm has been sounded. Men are turning their backs on fiction. They are no longer reading mainstream novels. According to an article that appeared in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, a senior editor at a foremost New York publishing house has been driven to despair, depressed by the idea that men don't share their feelings. Are you and I part of the problem? Have you given up on reading fiction? Is the literary male, whatever that means, dead? Hi, I'm Liam, a retired history professor with a PhD in early modern English history. I love history, and a big reason I started this channel was to encourage book clubs. I regularly read fiction, and not just because I'm in a book club. So I'm interested in the topic of this video and have thoughts. I will briefly explain the situation that created the alarm and give my 3 takeaways that highlight whether this is a real thing or if it's anecdotal, a small sample, an Atlantic coast tempest in a teapot. American men no longer read new fiction. Is that true? Let me share with you my reading of the article and my 3-part reaction to it, primarily based on internal evidence. Foremost, I hope I'm not the literary male as described in a recent article by Joseph Bernstein in the Times that appeared in updated form on July 3, 2025, titled, "Why Did the Novel Reading Man Disappear?" The people Bernstein cites as experts long for the literary man who reads novels recommended by Oprah and Reese, but they eschew literary men who are pretentious misogynists who carry notebooks. I found Bernstein's article confusing because he compiled anecdotal evidence based on New York book publishing executives, random, no pun intended, bookstore owners, and chance observations in a bricks and mortar New York City bookstore. So is this objective reporting? To be fair, there were a few calming voices, like the novelist Jordan Castro, who said simply that the subject matter of contemporary fiction does not appeal to men. Simple and reasonable. But Mr. Bernstein immediately described him as a novelist whose books inhabit the minds of frustrated men. I read Castro's The Great Silent Roar about a man who tries to commit suicide during COVID and thought it had a creative plot and was better written than loads of other nouveau fiction being offered these days. Bennett Cerf, where are you? Mr. Bernstein, to his credit, did include a token Midwesterner who weighed in. It was a man from Lawrence, Kansas, who leads a men's book club. I'd hardly call him the typical man who comes to my book clubs, as he just happens to be married to a best-selling author. I did, however, appreciate the admission that one of the draws of the Kansas Book Club was that they served liquor. I encourage you to read Bernstein's article for yourself. I'll include the citation in my description. Hey, no booze in my book clubs, just plenty of good specialty coffee served in a congenial atmosphere. Well, have men abandoned fiction? While it would be impossible to draw a definitive conclusion based solely on Bernstein's article, I offer you my 3 key takeaways. First, there is no crisis here. We should all agree that most men want to read good books, even if novels are not their thing. Don't we have sufficient empirical evidence that people generally, not just men, are distracted by technology? Aren't they? Bernstein's article points out that the enemies of men reading are online gambling sites and fantasy games. There are probably more things than that. Are not some women distracted by online games, YouTube, reality television, and drama, their preferred alternative to reading? I get suspicious whenever I read that a whole group of people is categorized in some way. We used to call it label and dismiss. Let's don't be bigoted enough to suggest that men are not as literate as women. That is to suggest they are essentially non-literate, so we can dismiss them as dunderheads who can't think deeply enough about their lives to read contemporary fiction. However, if you read the article, you should find that Bernstein's sources also marginalize the kinds of genres that men do read, such as fantasy, science fiction, and even proven works like authors like Hemingway and Faulkner, which a snarky New York bookstore assistant manager calls American high school reading curriculum. Look, reading's a matter of taste, and that's my second point. Reading's a matter of taste. It's okay, perhaps virtuous, to read the tried and true. Men would rather read Marcus Aurelius than gamble that Ocean Vuong will stand the test of time, despite the recommendation of somebody like Oprah Winfrey. I read The Emperor of Gladness, and I thought, as did one brave reviewer, that I think enough of Ms. Winfrey to find it hard to believe that she actually read that. So much for approaching reading a little more like women do, getting recommendations online from celebrities and influencers, browsing together, forming book clubs. It's ridiculous to suggest that men don't take suggestions from their friends or experts. They just don't accept carte blanche what the societal elites are dishing out. They have other trusted sources. They're probably not going to read Romantasy, although there's an exec at Barnes & Noble who has evidence to the contrary. Did the ones who published such stuff think that men would buy it? Poet E. E. Cummings famously said, "There is some shit I will not eat." And that applies to lots of things these days. Third, it was a business decision not to promote fiction that appeals to men. Read the article. That's the cynical thread that can't be ignored despite the moral superiority of the publishing moguls. It's okay to ask, do I have to read contemporary fiction being cranked out by the big New York publishing houses? It's at least a fair question to ask if I must make the new fiction medicine, which is marketed to 30 to 65-year-old women, if I'm not in that category. Historians like John Lukács said 20 years ago the traditional novel was dying and being displaced by well-written nonfiction history. There is badly written history, fantasy, and science fiction, but I don't blame the genres. There is superb and uplifting literature that is not in novel form. And speaking of good writing, what about the tried and true mentioned earlier? We refer to many of them as the great books of Western civilization. There it is again, though someone may object. The canon of the toxic conspiracy of men. Look, Nathaniel Hawthorne's misogyny did not prevent novels being written by women and for those novels to become bestsellers in the 19th century. Bernstein's article says so. I think the reasonable meditation for both men and women should be, aside from personal taste, how can I defend much of contemporary fiction when I know little of the excellent and enduring works of the past? Thus, history, my friends. Read history. That's my response to a timely article by Joseph Bernstein. It's as if he wrote it to celebrate the premiere of my YouTube channel. Just kidding. But thanks, Mr. Bernstein, you have put men's reading front and center for a while. So, did you read the article? Have you given up on fiction or even reading? Why or why not? What fictional books have you read that you would recommend to someone who gave up fiction? Please put your ideas in the comments below. Comments are welcome. If you enjoy this type of content, such as reading clubs, history and contemporary fiction, topics that my book clubs also explore, please make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for joining me today. Please take the time to read for yourself and consider sharing what you read with others. Let's get a conversation going. Additionally, take a look at these earlier videos right here, which discuss men's book clubs. I share my ideas for men's book clubs based on volumes that have kept interest and stimulated discussion. Although my recommendations are history forward, I include some well-written novels.